Welcome back to my speed draw mini-series. I've asked 5 friends for 5 outfits, and over 5 days, I'll draw 5 characters, spending 5 hours on each one. So, let's get started. This outfit request comes from my friend Marianne. This is the most straightforward request so far. Here's 4 articles of clothing, just go for it. I have a lot of trouble drawing sitting poses, so I was definitely using a reference for this one. Instead of having my reference image in my work area, I actually had it on my phone next to my Cintiq. I find looking back and forth between 2 screens is easier than just keeping one screen cluttered. I wanted to try something different this time, and instead of starting with line work, start with the colors and try a sort of painterly approach. Pretty quickly I realized this was not going to work out. It's not something I'm experienced with, and in a project like this that has a strict deadline and time limit, I decided experimentation like this was a bad idea, so I went back to doing things the way I would normally do them. The purpose of this project is more so to regain previous skills as opposed to building new ones. I can save that when nobody's watching. In my sketch, I'd given her a bacon earring, and I'm so disappointed that I forgot about that when I went to do the line work. It would have been so cute. Back when I was more active, I worked almost exclusively in Flash, and with an animation approach to drawing. Even months before I started making these videos, I started to focus on working primarily in Photoshop, and I've had to unlearn certain habits that just don't apply to the work I'm doing now. For instance, when you draw something you're going to animate, it pays to split things into multiple layers. You put your head and limbs and any details that you want to move separate from other things. You put it in its own layer, so that when you go to make something move, you can work on each bit piece by piece. With a still image like these, splitting it all up into layers just creates unnecessary hassle. I had to adjust my habits to keep things simple with layers when working in Photoshop, when I realized just how much time I was wasting with no real payoff, trying to keep everything separated. Another big difference I had to get used to is that Photoshop works in raster as opposed to Flash's vector. Vector images can be blown up and shrunk down without any loss in quality, but if you try that with a raster image, you risk blurring or pixelating what you've drawn. I had to relearn fairly recently that you need to work at a high resolution in Photoshop if you want your work to look any good. As a placeholder, I colored in her sweater entirely red. I realized that I see red as the primary color in rainbows. Something about the trio of red, orange, and yellow have a more dominating presence than green, blue, and purple do. If you had to condense a rainbow into one color, what color would you choose? The rainbow sweater was absolutely the most time-consuming part of this illustration. I was tempted to try to do this in simpler ways, using gradients and blocked-off selections, but I knew with all the hassle that would entail, it still wouldn't be a fraction as good as if I just colored everything manually. I was kicking myself halfway through for making each line of color so thin. This would have been a lot easier if it was thicker, but I think the thinness was ultimately the best choice. This is the first outfit I'd be comfortable wearing. The egg beret is super cute. I want one. The rainbow sweater, I don't know how I haven't bought one yet. I'm so down for a rainbow sweater. I'm compelled to learn how to knit just so I can make my own rainbow sweater. I've actually been wanting to pick up knitting for quite a while. I have yarn, I have needles, but whenever I realize I have the time or the energy to learn a new skill like that, knitting is just not on my mind, so maybe this will motivate me to commit to actually learn how to knit. I realize I've become a lot more confident when it comes to color and shading. I mentioned before that with certain aspects of these previous drawings, like the satin texture on the Moon Queen and the skirt on the Bashi Bazook, that I was intimidated at first and wasn't really sure how to convey the textures that I wanted to. But as I've gone on, it's come more naturally to me. Things are actually starting to click now. I'm using this tool called the Art History Brush. It allows you to select a point in your file's history and then redraw everything based off of that history, but also with a weird, wobbly, filtery line to it. I really don't understand this tool. I don't know what the intended application of it is, but I managed to make it work pretty well to get a yarny texture on the sweater. In fact, I went and used it on every edge of shadowing in this piece, just to break up some of those hard lines, make everything look a little bit more soft. I think it worked out really well. I colored in the line work on the sweater to match the rainbow pattern, and I'm not really sure if it paid off. I think it would have been a more wise use of time, as well as just better for the piece if I had kept it a solid color. The neutral gray background of my reference image reminded me of school photo day, and how they always had the plain backgrounds and then the fun ones with the lasers and the gradients, and I wanted to reference that with the background for this illustration. Something colorful and poppy and probably costs an extra $20. Say hello to Julia Egberts, everybody. She's a first-year photography student at Generic Name University. She enjoys cold weather and collecting ceramic cat figurines. This is definitely my favorite one so far. She looks like she could be a real person, and the type of person that everyone wants to be friends with. I'm really proud of how the rainbow sweater turned out. There's a lot of volume and curvature to it that I think emulates how a real baggy sweater works quite well. I'm not super happy with the shape of her eyes. I think it would have been better if I went for a more cartoony approach, had them more rounded. The way they are now seems like it's too much of an in-between of cartoony and realistic, and I think if I committed to either one style, it would have been better. There's also something about her hands that doesn't quite look right to me. I think trying to use the thick outlines and the shading is a little too much, and they just look muddy and busy. I think if I had used thinner outlines or even just no outlines at all between some of her fingers, everything would look more clear. So we've only got one more illustration left. Make sure to stick around to see how this project comes to a close. See you then.